Welcome to Connections, the podcast from addiction professionals of North Carolina, where we explore the nuances of addiction and mental health through the lens of policy and practice.
We're your hosts,
Sarah Howe
and Morgan Coiner, and we're here to help you see how it all connects. We are so excited to be live from our spring 2024 conference. We are at the beautiful Lake Junaluska in Western North Carolina with over 300 attendees from across the continuum of substance use for a week of learning and networking and hopefully also some relaxing to enjoy the beautiful scenery. And we are just excited to be able to bring you some special guests to the podcast this week.
So on the podcast today, we have our keynote speaker for the spring conference, Maryum Ali. Welcome, Maryum.
Thank you.
We are so excited
to be here.
Have you.
I'm honored, very honored.
When I started talking about how do I introduce you, there's so many ways I could introduce you, right? As a social worker, as a daughter, as a writer, as a performer, as somebody who's been in a docuseries. All of those things, right?
I'm a Renaissance woman.
Right, right. So what's exciting to me is having you here and the connection to some of the work that you have done that is adjacent but touches this field.
Yes.
And why that's important. So I think, the first question we have for you is just doing the work that you do and how you came to it, why you do this work.
Well, I did it. I actually retired from it, direct practice, but I was a social worker in the youth development gang prevention area in the highest crimes areas of Los Angeles from about 2000 to 2013. And my inspiration was my grandmother and my father. My father, many people know him, he's Maryum Ali, a boxer. And he was such a humanitarian at heart. He loved young people. And I watched him, despite his fame and success, care so much about marginalized communities. And it was really in him day to day. My grandmother was like a community social worker. She was very unconditional with family members with addictions. She helped seniors and ill people all the time. I mean, the two of them and my grandfather as well. So my grandparents and my dad, they really guided me on this path. And I was going to go into education, but I had, unfortunately, a cousin, Atto Ali. He was 18 years old, looking forward to college, and got killed in gang violence. So when I was in school, as soon as he died, I switched my major to social work. And I wanted to work in South Los Angeles, where at the time, the gang crime there at the time was probably top 3 in the country. So yeah, that's how I started.
Wow. And you worked with youth, right?
Yeah, I was in prevention. My first job out of school was a case manager in a prevention program. A lot of ups and downs. They wanted to make me the director after 2 years, but I refused the promotion because I wanted a lot of experience with the families and kids. And I felt, how could I direct someone and I have 2 years of experience? So I eventually became a director of programs, maybe like 6-7 years in, or a few years. And then the city of Los Angeles, they've always had a comprehensive strategy to address gangs. But the mayor's office, the mayor at the time was Mayor Villaraigosa, and he took on the whole management of that funding and put it under the mayor's office. So I left direct practice and then became a regional manager at the mayor's office of gang reduction youth development, which I was excited about because all the auditing and training that I used to receive, now I was in that position to do that for the agencies who provided gang prevention and intervention. Yeah, in Los Angeles.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like gangs are sort of this like untouchable area of the field that people don't want to talk about. They say, oh, I could never do that. Like it's too hard. And I'm interested in kind of your perspective on that, having done that work, and just your experience and how it maybe compares to that.
Yeah, like people with substance use disorders, gangs are stigmatized. They're people. A lot of them are very nice people. We see with the war on drugs and with, crack epidemic and the gang wars, the news only portrayed one side of gangs. Now, don't get me wrong, it's horrible. However, like with addictions in many ways, it's a created phenomena that came out of poverty and discrimination and police brutality and so many things that are social. So yeah, it's just news and coverage and media and culture is it's very powerful. But yeah, it is I at one point, I mean, I was in the middle of a drive-by shooting, could have been shot, and that was a pivotal moment for me, and I'm like, whoa, this is deep. But yeah, I mean, it takes a certain kind of person. I had a very personal connection of why I was doing it, and I'm also very good at connecting with young people. I'm like the kid whisperer. I mean, they were giving me the most challenging cases, and I welcomed it because youth they're so intuitive, they're so street smart, they know sincerity. They're testing you all the time. And I see them testing me and I really tried to educate myself on what's the best way to build rapport so you can get the message across, work collaboratively with them. So yeah, I mean, I felt I was good at it, and I'm the oldest of 9 kids. So
wow.
I'm kind of like, mother hen, type of person. So yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's so, through movies, you just think, you just don't see them. They've been dehumanized in many ways. And also, the news covers more bad news than good news. So we're getting a skewed view of a whole population of people.
What's that number one rule of journalism? If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we see. And yet, when you think about gangs at their heart, there's people seeking connection.
Yeah, exactly. And the root causes is not in their DNA, and it's not inherent. It's like you said, there's something else to it. And if you address that, then you have a chance of being successful with people.
Well, and I think the root causes are the same root causes as addiction.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
A lot of them
right
are.
now we're calling them the social determinants of health.
Yeah.
But it's stuff that people working in this field have always known were factors.
Yes, most definitely. And there are similarities. And then, addiction has this, it's specific risk factors. But yeah, there's more overlap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, more overlap than not. Yeah.
I'm really curious. I'm so glad you mentioned prevention. Mm-hmm. We don't often, it's the afterthought that should be the fourth thought, right? And we do a lot of work at APNC on prevention. But we talk specifically about substance use disorder prevention. How do you go about when you talk about gang prevention in the communities you worked in?
The organization I started at, I mean, it was wonderful. We were very intensive. We worked with middle school youth. Of course, that's the age group where if you're going to join, that's usually the time they do join. And it was very intensive. We had the kids for 3 years. You don't change like that,
Fly in.
Right. We worked with family. It was very family focused. We tried to build protective factors and skills so they can cope and be resilient. And we did that in so many ways. We were like mentors in many ways. So when and my supervisor was a child psychologist, and he did group therapy called Skills with a Z. It was very culturally connected to them and who they were. We spent just a lot of time with them. We worked at our organization and out of the school. We had a very close relationship with the school, but we did everything. We had special workshops. We had skill building. We took them out of the hood to places that they had never gone before so they could see their possibilities. I remember we went to Yosemite Mountain for a 2-night camping trip. Wow. I'm telling you, one of the kids came back. A few of them, and we met an African-American ranger. And they came back and was like, I didn't know that was a job. And 2 of them was like, I want to do that. Wow. And some of them they're miles from the beach, and some of them had never gone to the beach, and they lived not just a freeway ride, 15-minute ride away. So I think the year before I got there, they went to DC and went to Congress. So we tried to, everything we did in terms of giving them services is build the resilience and also have a sense of purpose. A lot of these kids, they think they're going to die before 30 because they know 30 people who've died between 15 and 20, right? So it was
How
very
do you break that belief.
Yeah,
That's
you break it,
fatalistic
right?
belief, right?
And also just the safety factor. I mean, a lot of kids just join to be safe because the gangs are the protection.
Yeah.
We replaced that at our program. So yeah, I mean, but our program was very robust, and it just wasn't a class here or two. We really worked with that entire family for 3 years. So by the time they got to high school, we had them indoctrinated to love themselves. You know,
Amazing.
yeah.
Isn't it
that's
sad that it
wonderful.
takes indoctrination to do that, though? You know,
Hey,
like
you have
it's,
to undo things,
I
you know, and
know.
then you have to bring the family along because you could teach them something and they go
Mhm.
home and they have the things that are working functionally in the house. So you have to bring the parents along. So we had the parent support groups. And a lot of times I would call for the kids and I would be on the phone with the mom for 2 hours because she needs to vent, maybe an
Yep.
hour.
Yep.
So it's like, you know, that kind of work, I couldn't look at my clock and say, I'm off at 5 now.
Right. Right.
It might be
Mhm.
6:30. It might be 7. I might
Right.
have to go meet with a parent on a
Permission.
Saturday.
Yeah.
You
And that was
know?
pre-COVID, by the way. When you
Yeah.
talk about all the
Yeah.
challenges that you were managing, and now
Yeah.
we look at today's youth that are still coming out of the pandemic,
Yeah.
the epidemic of loneliness, as the Surgeon General says, it has to be mounting even
Yeah.
to try to mitigate those risk factors
Yeah.
and build up those protective factors when in the last 4 years, as a young person, you've really had the odds. Really. A
Believe it or
little
not,
different.
I think what's really different now than when I was working is the internet and social
Oh,
media.
Yes.
Oh,
Phones are an addiction,
yep.
and kids can't put them down. Even adults can't put them down. And back then, they were more willing to come to the rap session, peer group session, and talk and discuss. Now it's like this, and I really don't know how it is for, you know, if I did this job
Right.
now. That's saying I don't know if the kids. I don't know. You
It's
know,
really
I mean,
changed.
yeah, I don't know how that would be. But that is
Mhm.
a huge difference is the social media because kids are literally comparing themselves to the world.
To everything they
To
see in a split
everything.
second over and over
Yeah.
and
And
over.
and it's so the materialism is just heightened. It's just it's I mean, we thought it was bad, but now it's really bad.
And it's like COVID almost, we were talking about this earlier of we had a generation of kids who like grew up on the internet. So
Mhm.
already their skills to connect with people
Right.
were less than probably generations before. Then you had COVID
Yeah.
and they're removed from pretty much the one place they're forced to connect with others,
Right.
which is school.
Yeah.
And so we've got this double layer of a
They're
lack of
required on the
connection,
internet.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like how breaking down that
Yeah.
one barrier was
Yeah.
hard, and now we've got that second one up. And so like the lack of connection just sort of
Yeah.
becomes this through line to what I'm at least for this moment will say is like one of the largest risk
Mhm.
factors I think
Mhm.
our youth face today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a while now, but I had written a piece about
Mhm.
social media, and I still believe that we look back on the tobacco settlement.
Mhm.
We look back on the most recent opioid settlement. I foresee a social media settlement at some point where we're going to go back and we're going to look at that algorithm
Yes.
and we're going to look at how we addicted people as we talk
Mhm.
about addiction to phones,
Yes.
to what we see in social media, and now what has it done to our brains? What has it done to our youth mental health? We know that the president's administration opened a new social media safety center.
Yeah, yeah.
So what does that say, right?
Yeah. I watched the Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. I would
Mhm.
advise anyone to watch that. And the creators of this whole thing won't even give their children cell phones because they know the addiction
Mhm.
is so powerful.
It is. It's
Yeah.
very, very powerful. So I'm curious, as you speak around the country, you talk to different groups, how do you really look at where you were then with what you were doing, look at today and all the experiences you have and give them some hope? Because I
Yeah.
think that's the important piece, right?
Well, this is the thing. We have, we're in a polycrisis in world. And if we don't do anything, we'll get overwhelmed with the worst of the worst. So someone has to be there to do this work.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
I remember in college, it was a policy class and the teacher was really mean. And everyone was like, oh, you got him? Oh, he's hard. He doesn't give out A's. He's so hard. I remember him saying, half of you after this class are not going to be social workers when I tell you about this field. And he basically said, social services and these kind of organizations, they are created to fail. They don't work. And he gave us the proof. But what he didn't talk about were the structural determinants that the only way we have access to those is through civic engagement, trying to vote for people that are going to put in policies or support policies that'll, kind of deal with the disparities and deal with poverty. And I said to myself, if I help one person, it's worth me being in this field. You can't, because when you look at the whole picture, it'll just depress you,
Right.
So you have to be good at what you're doing with who you're doing it with. And you could try to find ways to get in other sectors, whether it's politics or civic engagement or whatever, getting involved in your local government, but be good at what you're doing. So my goal was be good at dealing with these kids that I'm working with, be successful at that. Because if you look at the whole picture, you would think doing this work doesn't matter, but it does. And people who do this work, we know our clients and we see them go from A to Z with the help of organizations and support. And that's worth it, so that's the only way I kept my sanity. Mm-hmm. I actually left the field because of political bad work culture politics. It wasn't because of the work. Yeah. It was that. Right. It wasn't the clients and the actual work itself. I got burnt out with when I worked at the mayor's office, it took a whole different tone. And I'm not a political. I'm about getting the work done for the community. All the politics around it annoys me. Yep. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot there, but it just wasn't me.
Right. Right. Nope. That extra layer makes it hard.
Goodness gracious.
So I want to ask you. I want to ask you about 60 Days In and that experience. And what I wanted to ask you first, love to share anything about it, but what made you want to be an inmate for 60 days?
Okay, so for people who are watching this who never heard of it, 60 Days In was they said it was a social experiment reality show. And I had just left the mayor's office and I was had no money coming in and I'm looking for another job. And I'm really down because I'm like, in LA, it's 50% Latino, so you have to speak Spanish. So most of these jobs are like Spanish. I'm like, I don't speak Spanish. So I got real frustrated. And I'm sitting there and I get a call and they said, A&E Network talked to someone and said they want to talk to you and you'll be a good candidate for being on this show where regular civilians will go on a real jail for 60 days and no one in the jail will know that they're not inmates. So I did the little interview. I was very, I don't like reality shows and I don't want to do anything contrived. You have these conflicts on reality shows. You have to have it. Right. And I told them, if you're going to make me say anything or do anything, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And when I found out the safety precautions that they had, because we had surveillance 24 hours. We had different nonverbal codes if we felt like we were in danger and they would just pull us right out. Okay. So there were people at the jail in a room watching us the whole time. Then when I found out, no offense, the population was white women 35 and under, I didn't fear that because I've worked with gang members and in gang environments. And I just felt I was tough enough to handle them. Mm-hmm. I just did. Yep. And I was.
But still, it's 60 days in jail. That's rough.
I wasn't worried about.
You can be tough and that's hard.
I wasn't worried about that because I know people stay in jail for 10 years. So I can do 60 days. I want my agenda was to actually talk to women. It was like, for me, it was research. Talk to women who are actually in there for real. Get to know them. Hear their journeys. Look at the jail system, see what that's about, because the whole point was we're going in this jail to inform the sheriff on how the jail can be improved. Mm-hmm. Right. My only deal breaker of doing it was I'm not snitching on them.
Sure.
So some people did that. They were
Yeah.
like, if contraband gets in a certain way, I'm not talking, because as a social worker, people have to trust me. And if they see me on television telling on people, they'll be
Yeah.
like, oh, you're a snitch. How am I going to,
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Ruins
said,
everything.
because I'm doing what I'm doing, I have to keep that confidential, but I will tell on the facility if the facility is not the way it should be. So that's what I did. And my biggest recommendation was better drug rehabilitation
Remember that.
because it was weak.
Yeah.
It was a lot of idle time in there. I mean, and I'm sitting there going, they're watching Lifetime TV all day. There could be workshops coming in here. There can be therapy. There could be all kind of pro-social learning. I mean, all you have is time. And in certain countries, that's what they do. People come out with degrees. They come out skilled. They come out better. So we have a punishment system, and in our Constitution, it's a slavery system. It's in the Constitution. Slavery is ended except for incarceration. It's in the Constitution.
Wow.
If this was a trivia game, we
Maybe I
both
should
would have
put
lost.
that in the speech tomorrow. But it's like
You'll
slavery
get some jaw
is
drops.
illegal except for incarceration. So it's not a place of rehabilitation on purpose. They say the system is broken. It's not broken. It's operating exactly
It's
the way
the
they want it
system
to
they created.
operate.
We used to always say I worked in a reentry facility, and it was our kind of motto was that the prison is a holding place, not a healing place. And so the women are held there, and then they get out, and then they can start to try to heal or or get right back in the cycle because they don't have any resources.
Most states spend more money per inmate than student.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And I think a college education,
volume.
Princeton education is more expensive than one inmate per year in California.
Dang.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
embarrassing.
It really is. We can dive into that. Wow.
And then if you look at the money train, commissary, millions of dollars per state. Yeah. They gouge on the phone when you use the phone, major gouging on that. It's a $1 billion industry.
And I'm curious.
And then there's the private ones. The whole, we could.
Even the public ones, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Even the public ones.
And what's, from my very limited knowledge, what's the healthcare like in there? Is
very
it
poor.
Non-existent.
It's bad. And that was my other recommendation, but they didn't show it on television because there was a lawsuit against them regarding that.
Interesting.
How about that?
Nurses were sometimes not even there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reports right now in different states across the country about healthcare in our criminal justice system.
And then, of course, it's compounded with the addiction folks because they're dying in jail.
Yeah,
they're detoxing.
Yeah, they're
not getting the assistance.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's sometimes you just have to wonder what is the sinister agenda of this, because people are passing away, and it's just all the more reasons we have to really look at policy and look at who we're voting for and work on that.
Are you glad you did it?
Oh my gosh, it was a spiritual experience. It was a humbling experience. I was already a very grateful person, but I was even more grateful. My skin, I've always had good skin. My skin was messed up after 60 days. It was really weird looking. I ate literally raw fruits and vegetables for 2 weeks straight just to get myself together. You do get more unhealthy because the food is garbage. Yes, you're in jail. I understand that, but people who are there, they're not going to live long.
There's still people.
It's really going to cut their life short. Very rare that you get fruit or, oh man, I remember I was in there for Thanksgiving and all the food was the same color. It was all just like a weird beige, everything. It was, so yeah, I mean, I wanted to feel that. And I did learn a lot from it.
What'd your family think about you doing
They
it?
couldn't know. I could only tell. They said you can't tell anyone. I could only tell my sister who lived with me. I told her, and I told my business partner and a friend of mine, one friend, to be able to help my sister if she needed help because she was in college, and that's it. And then my aunt in Chicago, where most of my family is in.
So what happens though in 60 days if they call you? someone wants to find you?
I told them you have a story. I told them I'm going away to do something confidential for work, and I'll be back. But you're not going to be able to reach me.
That was
Yeah,
factual.
you're not going to be able to reach me. And one of
Yeah.
my sisters figured it out. She goes, she's doing a reality show.
Tell her.
I have a sister who's in entertainment, and she's like, that sounds like a reality show to me.
That's funny.
Love that. Love that. Called out, right?
Yes,
Called
yeah.
out. Fantastic.
Well, we're coming up close to time, and I have
Oh,
with me
nice.
here, I
Forgot to
shook
bring
up the
other ones.
world. So I
Oh.
wanted to just give you an opportunity. We're at the 20-year anniversary of you
Yes.
writing this book, I Shook Up the World, by someone named Maryum
Yeah.
Ali. Tell us about this book, what inspired you to write it, and just
I actually, so funny. I'm going to talk a bit on self-care, and I actually wrote this book when I was I was working as a social worker, and I was just so stressed out, and I wanted to do something creative, and I also wanted to write a book about my dad. But I wrote this in 2003. I Shook Up the World, The Incredible Life of Muhammad Ali. And I got a call last year from the publisher saying we want to republish it in paperback as a 20th anniversary edition and update it because there's a timeline in the back of his life, and that could be used for book reports. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So it's a new book, but it's an old book. You can be on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, could be ordered. It's only $10.99. And I just wanted to tell his story in an inspirational way for kids, because much of his career in the beginning, people didn't like him. He was despised. The major fights he had a lot of people doubting that he could win. He was the first boxer to win the heavyweight championship 3 times. And but it's fun because he had a fun personality. He's very funny. And so I feature some of the funny poetry, and I had the illustrator illustrate those poems. So as they're learning some of the pivotal history, they can laugh too. So the kids love it. They really do.
And did your dad saw it?
Yeah, I mean, he was still alive and doing pretty good, and he wrote the foreword to it. That's still in there. And so funny, I called him because there was one poem I couldn't find that he wrote about winning at the Olympics in 1960, and I kind of recreated it. But I said, Dad, I have to get your permission. There's one poem I can't find, and this is what I wrote. And he was like, I didn't write that. And I'm like, no, I wrote it. I was like, as I said, do I have your permission to put it in here? He's like, yeah. So it was really nice.
I love that.
Talking to him about it and everything.
Well, I think it's cool too. I mean, I told you I actually have 13 nieces and nephews, which is a whole other story, but there's 3 that live in the same city as me. And it's, Muhammad Ali is not a name necessarily in the news every day anymore. They're not going to grow
they're not
up,
going to know.
right,
Yeah.
hearing, but it's so cool that like his legacy gets to live on for many more generations.
Yeah. So when I'm gone, maybe that book will still be around.
That they'll get to learn his story. And
thank you.
Well, and you're talking to 2 women who have lost their fathers and loved their dad, and there's something about that connection between a father and
I was
a
a
daughter.
daddy's girl.
Same.
Yep.
Same.
It really was.
I have this picture of y'all on the back.
Yeah.
I have the same picture of me and my dad. I think she has the same. I just was like, it's the same exact. So it's very
so cute.
Yeah,
because that's what you're gonna do, right? You're just gonna,
So it's very special, and I think
Thank
it
you
is
so
the
much.
connection with our dad.
Personal connection. So many people know a name. They know the history. We know of his fights, right? But this is your father.
Yeah.
Right.
This isn't Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all time. This is Muhammad Ali, Maryam's dad.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference.
It does.
So I'm glad that this is out there. And
I'm glad
they
because I was getting a lot of people wanting it, and I'm like, that book's 20 years old. I don't have it anymore. So it was perfect.
Yeah.
Because now people can get it again. So
wonderful.
You did him proud.
Thank
and
you
I
so
do
much.
believe, I have to fact check myself, but I'm pretty sure my grandfather worked one of his fights.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
He was the president of the Andy Frank Ushers, and I'm pretty sure
Isn't that
he worked one of his
something?
fights.
That's
so
really
there's
cool.
that connection
Isn't that cool? That's
to our
really cool.
elders.
I've been getting a lot of interesting connections since I've been here in North Carolina. I was in Walmart, and this lady said, I worked in addiction with people, and I'm like, what? I mean, it was just crazy.
It's a small but mighty field.
Yeah.
That is, there's, like you were talking about in social work, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of people with their story as well. And we bring these stories to life, and we carry that forward so the next person has their story. And so thank you for sharing yours.
Yeah, and that's what I want to do tomorrow on the talk, share like little bitty stories here and there. Because, facts are facts. That's great. And I have those.
We can Wikipedia.
But I have
day,
those,
right?
but I'm trying to put some stories in there. So I hope I have
Absolutely.
enough stories to keep you guys awake.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But I'm not going to be sleepy. I'll tell you that.
No, and for taking the time
Yeah.
to have the conversation, to talk about these connections, to talk about whether it's family connection, whether it's your work, the work you did in the jail. I mean, these are all things that not everybody does or talks about.
Yeah.
Or they don't always share it. You, of course, did it on a television show where everyone got to see those moments, right?
Crazy, yeah.
But that's also something that, Morgan and I look at each other like, I don't know, I could do 60 days. And then you said it so eloquently. People do 10 years.
Yeah,
do 60
I knew
days.
I was getting out.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Right.
interesting. This is connections. I didn't know that. I didn't realize that when I did the title to the speech.
Right.
Connecting the dots.
Connecting
I had
the
no
dots,
idea.
yeah.
I was like, whoa, connections.
There's connections everywhere. Well, thank
There
you
sure are.
so,
Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you.
This has been wonderful. We're
Thank
so
you
excited
so much for
your
everything
speech.
that you're doing. The world needs you. North Carolina needs you. So thank you for your great work as well.
Thank you.
Well, it's a privilege to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, wonderful. Thank you.